The story you're about to enjoy is a factual tale, read to you from a fictional location. We believe.
Madam, I thought you may like to know that Aunt Tiggy has been seen wandering around the entrance hall and napping in the window seat.
Oh, how wonderful. I love Aunt Tiggy. Thank you for letting me know, darling.
No, not wonderful, madam. One of the guests tried to talk to her.
Oh, no. We cannot let that go on. How do we discourage her?
Dead mice.
Welcome to the Midnight Library, everyone. We're so pleased to have you in for a visit. I'm your librarian and host, Miranda Merrick. I'm sure you know the Midnight Library is also our home, not unlike your homes, really. The library is very old, and very strange noises can sometimes be heard. We're quite used to them by now, though. The experience of hearing a strange noise in your house, a noise so weird in nature that you cannot tell for certain exactly where it's coming from, has no doubt caused all of us to wonder if there might be something living in the walls. A scary thought indeed, but what if there's no noise? Dead things don't make a great deal of noise, but they can still reside in walls. Dead things, well-worn clothing, and secret magic symbols. If your house is old enough, any or all of these things could very well be waiting under the floorboards, inside your chimney, inside your walls. Tonight's tale could take place in nearly any European country in the world, but a couple from Australia present a gripping example of just how a cache of creepy items can be discovered, and how records of past owners reveal lives lived in sadness, loss, terror, and superstition. In the early 2000s, Alan and Linda Cooper purchased their dream house, a huge old, some might even say romantic, 19th century farmhouse on an isolated piece of land on the island state of Tasmania, Australia. When looking at a map of Australia, Tasmania is that southernmost solitary, droplet-shaped mass of land that looks as though it has decidedly jumped away from the mainland on purpose. During the colonization by the British Empire in the early 1800s, the island was a penal colony and received literally shiploads of common folk and convicts, some rightly convicted, some not, who would be free to attempt to carve out an existence in the wild and contentious expanse of land. In the year 1823, the farmhouse was constructed by its settlers on the uncultivated acres of a spot called Woodbury Vale in the Midlands of Tasmania. Soon after moving into the house, the Coopers discovered an old shoe, a lady's boot in the attic, which in and of itself is not that unusual a find in a very old farmhouse. But as they began to more deeply explore the structure of the vintage house, peering into voids and shining light into walled-off crevices, last seen by their long-dead builders or forgotten inhabitants, they could see strange dust-blanketed shapes. And as they shone their torches into crawl spaces and roof peaks and steadied themselves on ladders, they could see odd scratchings and symbols carved into the ancient wooden beams. Some had blackened burn marks on them, as if to seal in permanently a desire or decree. Curiosity killing them, the Coopers began to fish out the dust-covered items from inside the walls, one by one. Some of the musty time-worn things were toys from a bygone era, dolls and hats and more shoes, 38 shoes in total. The shoes of various sizes and styles looked to represent any and all members of a family, and the very strangest find of all inside of a wall, a cat, a much deceased and greatly deteriorated, rather mummified, cat. The term mummified here is meant in its most basic form, meaning dried into the condition of the body of a mummy, not preserved in the linen wrappings of a mummy. These cats, when found, are not odorous or even repulsive, really. Their original form is easily recognizable, only now they are obviously cadaverous, their skeletons relaxed to the point of collapse, their once plush fur long vanished, revealing thin, velvet-like skin, now a taut gray canvas resting on the delicate bones beneath it. They show us that, although we retreat from the thought, there is beauty in decay. Our sponsor tonight is for those of you who need the upper hand in how fate deals your cards. She can help you, Miss Tess can, find out if your lover has a secret plan. And if they cheat, there's a thing you can do. It's all in her cards, and it's all up to you. Miss Tess's Trust Me Not Tarot cards, where there's never a death in the deck, unless you say so. Trust Miss Tess. After contacting a historian, the Coopers learned that the objects their house possessed were referred to as anti-sorcery items, which are a kind of attempt at reverse magic, meant to protect the home's occupants. Digging a little deeper into the history of the antique house and its clutch of creepy objects, the sorrowful story of the house's long ago inhabitants emerged, and the reasons why they put their faith in the squirreling away of these odd items. One of the many ships to arrive in the new land in the early 1800s held the Harrison family. Robert Harrison, who was not a convict, but a successful landowner and farmer, was granted a tract of 2,000 acres and all of the necessary farm equipment to establish a working farm in Woodbury Vale. With him was his wife Eliza and their 5 children. Their eldest son Hezekiah brought his wife also. The large farmhouse was promptly built to accommodate the newly settling family. Soon after the settlers began the grueling work of starting a working farm, they began to face all manner of hardships, and that continued for many years after the farm was established. The family seemed cursed, plagued with illness, droughts, supply shortages, infestations of wild animals, and attacks from aborigines and convicts. Then there was the loss of Hezekiah's 3-year-old son, which may have been an abduction. At one point, 4 Harrison family members all died in rapid succession. First, Hezekiah died. 4 days later, his father Robert. 7 days after that, Robert's wife Eliza passed away, followed by Hezekiah's wife just days after her. All 4 adults of the house gone. It was at this time that historical researchers think the remaining family members believed themselves to be unwelcome and actually cursed and doomed by some local powerful magic meant to remove them from the wild and unforgiving land. The stunned remaining family members couldn't just leave. This remote house in the middle of an island of a far-off foreign country was all they had. It was then they began to employ their own kind of protective magic. In an attempt to seal the house against the sorcery of external forces, They began the placing of personal items that they believed contained the family member's essence. This included their shoes, dolls, and clothing, placed inside the very walls. It was thought that these personal belongings of living or dead persons retained a bit of their spirit that would guard against the other negative spirits and curses put on the house and its people. They began to carve linear markings, so-called hexafoil symbols of protection, into the wooden beams or bones of the house, and then scorched those symbols with flames to entreat the element of fire to enforce their power. Also referred to as daisy wheels, a hexafoil is a rather pretty symbol created by the overlapping of 6 circular arcs to form a concentric flower-like image. The ancient symbol is thought to ward off witches, which hardly ever works, so I'm told. And then there was the cat, the long-dead, mummified cat. It had been placed behind a wall near the center of the sizable farmhouse. The cat was thought to embody an extremely potent kind of power to repel or somehow decoy an incoming witch. The thinking around this philosophy is unfortunately somewhat hazy. Reason being that although there are believed to be thousands of cats secreted away in walls of every kind of human dwelling across all European countries, as well as any lands invaded and settled by these countries, there is almost nothing that survives in writing pertaining to the practice. I must say here that I am in the habit of keeping a daily journal. Somewhat daily anyway. In it, I'm delightfully compelled to record my personal thoughts, practices, midnight library goings-ons, family encounters, private meetings, and happenings. My dear guests, if on a given day I were to inter a deceased cat inside a wall, I can assure you I would most definitely document such a happening in my journal. Not in a bragging sort of way, mind you, but in a factual manner, as in, Dear Diary, today I distinctly heard a hagfish laugh whilst on my pre-dawn stroll around Peril Pond. I've noticed Mr. Darling has neglected to tend to his 3rd shave of the day, and our house cat, Mr. Doodles, has died of old age and been placed inside the laundry room wall, the room in which he contentedly spent most of his days. The end. It's not that difficult to document it. So why there is so little documentation as to this practice and the direct intention of such a unique practice comes as a mystery to me. But that is why the Midnight Library exists, to hopefully dig up as much information as possible on the subject. Burying cats in walls. It sounds like something out of the ordinary that, given the high estimations of occurrences, might be more well known, yet the antiquated practice seemed to be popular and widespread, but not documented. Open your night window. Breathe deep the misty gloom. Welcome the weird women, the sisters of the moon. Wishing for witches, but your house is a hexafoil haven? Our reading tonight is brought to you by the AAA, the Anti-Apotropaic Association. Do away with those daisies and unbless that mess. The AAA can safely burn away even the most stubborn anti-witch marks. Just use the offer code Welcome Witches. There is, however, every reason to believe that this ancient cultural idea has followed us into the modern era. Folklore of the past centuries is rife with stories of cats gifted with extraordinary abilities, such as having a 6th sense and secret knowledge, and being in league with devils and witches, being able to shapeshift, and of course having 9 lives. This myth stems from cats appearing to be almost indestructible and living in such a carefree manner, behaving as though they had more lives to spare, roaming around at will, flinging themselves from one fence or rooftop to the next, and then most times casually landing on their feet, if they do happen to jump or fall even from a considerable height. Shakespeare himself included cats in his body of work no less than 44 times. England in particular is known for its many houses and even pubs that have dried cats discovered in their walls. And while it is not known if the animals were placed in their final resting places alive or after they had died, what is known is that they are sometimes found in a hunting pose, as though they were about to attack. This lends credence to the idea that cats were thought of as protectors of the home and life, keeping it free of unwelcome vermin, and that the dedication of the animal might continue on a spiritual plane in its afterlife. It is also thought that the location of the animal had significance as well. The cats were often placed in a point of the house believed to be at risk for the entrance of witches, ghosts, demons, or other spirits. So they are often found in chimneys, around windows, and under doorways to deter these beings from entering, or at least to try. In the UK, the Northampton Index reports they receive an average of about one mummified cat discovered in a home per month, but they suspect hundreds of finds every year are discovered and not disclosed or reported. There have, however, been reports of people discovering a dried cat in their home and keeping it there, just in case. After all, what's the harm? You may be wondering how we got this far along in the reading tonight without talking about the Egyptians and their reverence of cats, but we of course have some wonderful old dusty books on the subject. Dating back to the year 2900 BCE, the Egyptians worshipped the feline goddess Bastet. Beginning as Bast and then Bastet, the name means she of the perfume jar. She represents beauty, fertility, motherhood, and protection. The Egyptians believed cats to be the sacred embodiment of the goddess Bastet, so the animals were cherished and welcomed in the households across the kingdom. Both common people and noblemen considered cats as an honorable house guests. The noblemen regarded them as a status symbol of wealth and grace. The common folk valued them for their hunting prowess, the cats eagerly clearing the households and granaries of rodents and snakes. And although harming a cat was an offense punishable by death in ancient Egypt, it is known that literally millions of mummified animals have been found. It is believed that unscrupulous entrepreneurs would secretly breed cats and then kill them for the express reason of mummifying them. After that, selling them to priests, common folk, and anyone who wanted an actual cat mummy to adorn their personal shrine. This may very well be the beginnings of the belief that the deceased body of the cat was imbued with afterlife connections and powerful spiritual capabilities. And honestly, who can prove otherwise? And while you may not feel the need to protect your home by taking such drastic measures, we at the Midnight Library think you will most definitely like to see the examples and related artwork we have collected for you to view and perhaps partake of. It ranges from the macabre to the sublime, something for nearly everyone. Well, darling, I take it there are no more sightings of Antigua reported?
Oh, I know precisely where she can be found, madam. I flung a few dead mice behind the wine cellar wall. and she sauntered straight through the cobblestones to chase them.
Well done, Mr. Darling. Ghost mice for our ghost cat. Brilliant.
Pleasure to be of service, madam, and an honor to look after dear Aunt Tiggy.
October 31st, 1665. My dearest husband, it is with great sorrow that I write to inform you of the death of my fairest sister, Margaret. You probably only ever heard me lovingly refer to her as Tess or Aunt Tiggy, but her given name was Margaret. The unfortunate timing of the magic is tragic, and I am beside myself with grief. The sheer ugliness of her death has caused rumor in the village that she has been murdered. She had gotten up before sparrows fart to trade places with her best familiar, Tilly Longtail, and then strode into town to harmlessly eavesdrop outside the courthouse and the church. When she attempted to cross the street, our poor Tiggy was mercilessly trampled by Father Foolage's white stallion, Big Anthony, and then flattened by the cartload of holy books he was transporting, which I have since learned were actually wine and naughty drawings. At the very moment when everyone saw the cat killed, the human form of Aunt Tiggy, which held within it the spirit of Tilly Longtail, instantly died too. She had climbed high upon the library's west-flying buttress, which is simple for a cat but precarious for a woman, and fell to her death onto the courtyard cobblestones far below. Now their cherished spirits are forever locked in their opposing embodiments. Tilly Longtail was given a loving human burial in a beautiful Dorset casket and placed in the library cemetery. The headstone, when delivered, shall read, Our Margaret, Tess, Aunt Tiggy, Maleficarum non mariaris tua stulti. The poor, sweet, mangled body of Tilly Longtail, which held the spirit of dear Aunt Tiggy, was placed inside their favorite hat box and put behind the west dungeon wall. My husband, my heart is broken in two, but I know full well that here in the library Aunt Tiggy shall forever keep this place free of mice and the sort of people who would subdue us. It's obvious now that we and many of the town's inhabitants are separated into conflicting camps, just as it's been for hundreds of years. We shall rise to this challenge. I anxiously await your return in a fortnight's time. Please remember to dust yourself with arrowroot before you enter our private chambers. Your ever-loving wife, Mary.
The Midnight Library is co-produced by Tess Feifel and Astonishing Legends Productions and is edited by Sarah Voorhees-Wendell with music and sound design by Ryan McCullough. Special thanks to Miranda Merrick and Mr. Darling. No part of the show may be reproduced in any manner without express written consent. Copyright Astonishing Legends, all rights reserved.